Are you ready, viewers? I can't hear you. Oh! Welcome to today's Pokemon XD Gil and Darkness video, where today we're going to be taking on the game with the whole Spongebob crew. Okay, well that's probably enough of that. But anyway, I'm going to be using Pokemon that I think work well enough for who I think the 6 main characters of the SpongeBob cast are, with those being SpongeBob, Patrick, Gary, Squidward, Sandy, and Mr. Krabs. And of course, there's a lot of other Pokemon that would work well for other characters throughout the show. However, for this video in particular, I wanted to stick to who I think the 6 main characters are, and not really stretch into some of the secondary, tertiary characters. Now, before this video really gets started, I need to apologize in advance for the artwork I have done for some of these characters, starting of course with Elekid as SpongeBob. It has 45 HP, 63 attack, 37 defense, 65 special attack, 55 special defense, and 95 speed, and when it evolves into Electabuzz, it'll have 65 HP, 83 attack, 57 defense, 95 special attack, 85 special defense, and 105 speed. And even though maybe Electabuzz doesn't fit nearly as well as Elekid does, but I decided to let them all evolve anyway. Now moving on to their move pool, and they get access to mostly normal and electric type moves. However, they also get Psychic and Brick Break through TM, and also Seismic Toss if I need that in the early game. And interestingly, it actually gets Thunder Punch at level 9, which means that it'll have a very strong electric type move right off the bat. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Elekid in particular, which has a naughty nature, raising its attack and lowering its special defense. Maybe not the best nature in terms of gameplay and SpongeBob the character, but sometimes his antics can come off as naughty depending on the outsider looking in. Anyway, with that, our SpongeBob has the static ability, which has a chance to paralyze opponents whenever they make contact with us, and it starts with Leer, Quick Attack, and Thunder Punch. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into it. Moving right along, and the first thing we need to do is pick up this Poochyena so we can spin the wheel to see which Krabby crew member we're going to get next. Now, I guess something to note is that most of the Pokemon available to us are actually water types, as you would expect from seafaring creatures. But anyway, our next SpongeBob companion is Gary, who has 35 HP, 40 attack, 100 defense, 90 special attack, 55 special defense, and 35 speed. And when it evolves, it'll have 70 HP, 60 attack, 125 defense, 115 special attack, 70 special defense, and 55 speed. So right away, it seems like a really good Pokemon for the early game. It's just a bit unfortunate that through level up it starts with Constrict, and it takes a few levels to get the move Bite to actually make use of that special attack, but once it gets it, it will actually be quite strong. Speaking of, through level up it gets access to mostly normal and water type moves, and through TM and Tutor it's mostly more of the same with a couple ice type moves in there as well, and a few coverage options in Dark, Ground, Rock, and Fighting. But anyway, let's go and move on to our Gary in particular, which has a jolly nature, raising its speed but lowering its special attack. Definitely not a great nature for it, though it is exceptionally slow, so that might actually help a bit. As a snail, it gets access to shell armor because of its shell blocking critical hits, which is definitely a nice ability to have. And through level up, it gets access to Constrict and Withdraw by level 10. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. And we need to pick up our final member of the Krusty crew, at least for the early portion of the game. So with that, we get to spin the wheel again. Personally, we already have speed and power down, and we already have a defensive mon, so really anything is good here. And we get Squidward Tentacles himself. So moving on, Squidward has 40 HP, 40 attack, 35 defense, 50 special attack, 100 special defense, and 70 speed, and when it evolves, it'll have 80 HP, 70 attack, 65 defense, 80 special attack, 120 special defense, and 100 speed, making it the second fastest Pokemon we have access to. Through level up, it gets access to mostly poison, normal, and water type moves. However, it also gets a couple of ice moves through TM and Tutor, and also, strangely enough, Giga Drain. Now, unfortunately, it suffers a very similar fate to Gary, where it's a very defensive Pokemon with not the best move pool to start with, but Poison is definitely a more useful type in the early game, and it hits a bit harder. Anyway, with that, let's go and move on to our Squidward, which is surprisingly bold today, raising its defense but lowering its attack. Definitely not a fantastic nature, but the extra defense could come in handy. It gets access to the Clear Body ability, which prevents any stat reductions from things like Intimidate or Growl, which is kind of nice. And it starts with Poison, Sting, and Supersonic. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. And we move right along to the battle against the old man, where right away I go for Thunder Punch into the horsey to take it down in a single hit, and then he sends out his Shroomish. Abra goes for Ice Punch, and luckily, Abra actually gets paralyzed. I decide to send out Squidward now, and go for a Thunder Punch into the Abra, nearly taking it down in a single hit. Absorb is neutral into Squidward and does almost no damage. Quick Attack is able to finish off the Abra. I go for Poison Sting into Shroomish, not really doing too much damage, and despite being resisted, Spongebob's Thunder Punch is probably doing more to the Shroomish. Then Quick Attack, Squidward hits another Poison Sting, taking it very low. Unfortunately, it did get paralyzed, so it can't be poisoned now. So I lost that opportunity, and I finished off with another Poison Sting. So now moving on to the Power Rangers, and today I decided to fight Blue because I have Spongebob for super effective electric damage, and Squidward does exceptionally well against water types with its huge special defense stat. Anyway, I'd like to do just a little bit of rambling now. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Now, this was a very fun run to do, and I know for a fact the rest of this recording is going to be fun as well, because SpongeBob was definitely one of my favorite shows growing up. Also, I just KO'd my next Shadow Pokemon. What am I doing? Anyway, so expect a few references and definitely a lot of cursed pictures throughout this video. Anyway, after a quick refight, I go ahead and pick up this Spheal so that I have another chance at spinning the wheel. Now, this Spheal is the highest level Pokemon I can get for quite a while, so I want something that's stronger. And Mr. Krabs might actually fit the bill. It has 30 HP, 105 attack, 90 defense, 25 special attack, 25 special defense, and 50 speed, and when it evolves, it'll have 55 HP, 130 attack, 115 defense, 50 special attack, 50 special defense, and 75 speed, making it one of the most physically oriented Pokemon I have ever seen, with almost no stats anywhere else other than its attack and defense, which I guess does mirror Mr. Krabs' big meaty claws. Anyway, through Level Up it gets access to mostly normal and water type moves, and also Mudshot, and through TM and Tutor it's more the same with Ice and Rock in there as well. So unfortunately it doesn't really get to make use of its high physical attack for most of its moves, because Water and Ice are both special attacking types, but it may still be able to get by with just strong normal moves. Anyway, with that, our Mr. Krabs today has a jolly nature, once again raising its speed but lowering its special attack, so business must be booming at the Krusty Krab. Either that or he found $1 on the ground. Anyway, Mr. Krabs has the Hypercutter ability, preventing attack reduction, which is really nice, and he starts with Bubble, Leer, Vice Grip, and Harden. So with that, we move on. At level 17, SpongeBob gets Light Screen, and I pick up this Numble for our next Shadow Pokemon, and our next spin at the wheel. So now it's just down to Patrick and Sandy, and we roll Patrick. And while I do think that the Pokemon selected does match Patrick aesthetically, I don't think that the stats really reflect who Patrick is as a character. But anyway, Patrick has 30 HP, 45 attack, 55 defense, 70 special attack, 55 special defense, and 85 speed. And when he evolves, he'll have 60 HP, 75 attack, 85 defense, 100 special attack, 85 special defense, and 115 speed, making it a very fast special attacker with solid defenses. And moving over to its move pool, it's a lot of normal and water type moves, and unfortunately, or fortunately depending on how you look at it, Patrick is a Waterstone evolution, meaning that it doesn't really get any moves on level up that it couldn't already learn before, so I will have to determine the best time to actually evolve. But on the TM and Tutor side, Patrick gets access to a wealth of different attacking types like Water, Normal, Ice, Psychic, and Electric, which gives it a lot of different type variety. Anyway, moving on to our Patrick in particular, it has a rash nature, raising its special attack but lowering its special defense, which is a pretty good nature for Patrick, and also kinda fits him, depending on which episode you're looking at. Patrick has the Natural Cure ability, which heals status effects whenever it switches out, which is definitely going to come in very handy, and Patrick starts with Tackle, Harden, Water Gun, and Rapid Spin. So with that, let's go and move on. And we finally catch our final Shadow Pokemon, which is holding the Black Glasses item, raising all Dark type damage by 10%, but more importantly, it's also our final SpongeBob character, which is, of course, Sandy. She has 35 HP, 46 attack, 34 defense, 35 special attack, 45 special defense, and 20 speed, and when she evolves, she'll have 85 HP, 76 attack, 64 defense, 45 special attack, 55 special defense, and 90 speed. Through level up, she gets access to mostly normal type moves. However, like a lot of normal types, through the TM side of things, she gets access to a ton of different moves types, including Fighting, Water, Fire, Ice, Grass, Steel, Electric, and Ghost. So overall, Sandy is a great supporting character. However, on top of that, I think with her gadgets and scientific know-how, she gets access to a lot of different elemental things that any other Texas squirrel would not. But anyway, with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Sandy in particular, which of course has a careful nature, raising her special defense but lowering her special attack, which is a bit unfortunate because her gadgets aren't going to be dealing nearly as much damage, but I think it kind of fits the character, at least to an extent. She has the Keen Eye ability, preventing accuracy loss because she has a dome on her head, and she starts with Scratch, Defense Curl, Quick Attack, and Fury Swipes. So with that, we go ahead and move on. At level 15, Patrick gets the move Recover, and then I go into the battle against Lavrina. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and I lead with Spongebob and Mr. Krabs. I go for a Thunder Punch to get rid of the Beautifly right away, and then she sends out Roselia. Love Disc goes for Water Gun, not really doing too much damage. Vice Grip doesn't really do much damage into Roselia either. I expected it to do a bit more, because Roselia isn't actually all that defensive, but anyway, another Thunder Punch and Vice Grip is able to take it down, and then she sends out her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Delcatty. I go for another Thunder Punch with Spongebob, and I'm actually able to outspeed and deal a decent amount of damage, though unfortunately Mr. Krabs is not able to, though Vice Grip does probably put it in range for another Thunder Punch to finish it off, and then all that's left is the Love Disc, which will definitely go down to another Thunder Punch, so I decide to go ahead and take this time to swap out Mr. Krabs for Sandy, that way she can get a little bit of experience. Thunder Punch does take it down, and also level Sandy up to level 17 to get the move Helping Hand, which I decide to teach over Scratch, and with that, Lavrina is defeated. After the battle, Sandy evolves, which is going to be very nice, and then we run into the obligatory Mirror Bee, which of course you can't have a SpongeBob video without. I had considered doing something with him, but I'm not exactly sure who he would fit character-wise. But he does wear the same superhero suit as Sandy does in that one episode, and the ball could work as a class dome. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I catch his Voltorb, and I also teach the move Camouflage over Rapid Spin, and then I pick up the Ralts for the Twisted Spoon item to raise Psychic type damage, and then I go to the Realgam Tower to go pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect. And for now, I'm just going to teach it to Mr. Krabs, who happens to have Hidden Power Psychic at 34 base power, which definitely isn't all that great. Spongebob got Psychic, Patrick got Fighting, Squidward got Bug, Gary got Ice, and Sandy also got Bug. So, not a great deal of type coverage there, though it is okay. At level 25, Spongebob gets the move Swift, which I decide to teach over to Leer, and then I pick up the Swinub for the Never Melt Ice item to raise Ice type damage. At level 23, Mr. Krabs gets the move Mudshot, which I teach over to Leer, and then I go to the Tutor Lady to go pick up the move Body Slam, which I teach to Mr. Krabs over Vice Grip, and then at level 24, Patrick also gets the move Swift. Moving on to the battle against Snaddle, he leads with a Lantern and a Quagsire, and I lead with SpongeBob and Gary. Unfortunately, this isn't the best pairing, though I thought maybe I could get by with going for Light Screen. Unfortunately, Gary gets taken down right away. Mr. Krabs doesn't get hit by too much from a Water Gun. I go for Thunder Punch into Lantern, dealing almost nothing. Mr. Krabs gets taken down by a single Shockwave, so I send out Squidward, and luckily Quagsire misses. Go for Thunder Punch once again, taking it down to yellow. Shockwave nearly takes down Squidward in a single hit. Poison Sting does almost nothing, but does poison, so I know for a fact SpongeBob will be able to take it down with another Thunder Punch, and with Lantern down, he sends out his next Pokemon, which is a Shadow Lunatone. Now, unfortunately, my team is already quite damaged. I go for Poison Sting into Lunatone, hoping for poison, but unfortunately it doesn't happen, and Squidward goes down. I send out Patrick, go for Water Gun, not really dealing too much damage. Lunatone sets up Shadow Sky, go for a Thunder Punch into it, taking it only down to yellow. SpongeBob goes down, and while I am able to outspeed with Patrick, unfortunately a single Water Gun isn't able to take it down, so Lunatone is able to strike back and takes down Patrick with a crit Shadow Wave. So with that, I decide to go ahead and do a little bit of extra training. I get SpongeBob to evolve, which is going to be a huge increase to its stats. And soon after, I run into another Patrick, though this one might be Patrick not Star, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, with that, and a little bit of extra training, I go back into the battle against Snaddle. This time I lead SpongeBob and Sandy, that way I can use Helping Hand to boost the power of Thunder Punch. Unfortunately, it's still not enough to take down the Lantern in a single hit, so I go for another Thunder Punch, hoping to hit the Lunatone after Quick Attack takes it down, but unfortunately Quick Attack still wasn't enough to finish it off, so Lunatone is able to switch in for free. Quagsire uses Rock Tomb, lowering SpongeBob's speed, but I'm not sure if that's really going to matter just yet. Go for another Helping Hand, and Lunatone actually does outspeed with just a single speed drop, though I am able to take it down with a crit Thunder Punch. And then out comes Cast Form. Now, SpongeBob is way too important to have get whittled down at this point in the fight, because I need it for lighter, so I'm going to go ahead and swap him out for Gary at this point, and have Sandy use Quick Attack, not really doing too much to Cast Form, though any amount of damage is helpful. Sandy gets taken down, so I send out Patrick for its extra speed, Rock Tomb hits Gary, surprisingly not taking it down in a single hit despite it only being level 11. The Fruity Pebbles rain down, I go for Water Gun into the cast form, getting a crit, taking it down to low yellow, and Patrick is able to survive a Shockwave. Unfortunately, Gary does go down to a Water Gun, and this battle has started slowing down exponentially since SpongeBob left the field, so I decided to go ahead and bring it back. I've already stalled out a few turns of the Shadow Sky at this point, so there's only a couple left. And the combination of Patrick and SpongeBob here is actually pretty decent because I can hit them a Tang for neutral damage with both of them. So I go for Thunder Punch and Water Gun, which Thunder Punch takes it down to low red, and Water Gun is able to finish it off. And all that's left is that Quagsire, which I really don't have an amazing assortment of moves to take it down, but Water Gun and Swift should suffice. Which, that almost did half. Patrick unfortunately goes down, and maybe I should have swapped into Mr. Krabs here for the better damage, but I really wanted the extra experience on Squidward, and unfortunately it's not able to take it down in a single hit, so it does take one more turn. But anyway, now at level 28, Patrick gets the move Bubble Beam, which I decide to teach over Water Gun, and now that he has Bubble Beam, I decide to evolve him right away. Now moving into the Snag 'em base, where I teach Squidward the move Ice Beam over Constrict, and then I also teach Patrick Psychic over Tackle, and then I do a little bit of extra training in the Snag 'em base to get our Mr. Krabs to evolve. And now he's got that big meaty claw. Perfect timing to take down Plankton, who currently has our our Krabby Patty secret formula. Anyway, he leads with a Nuzleaf and an Electrode, and I send out SpongeBob and Patrick. Unfortunately, Electrode attacks Patrick, dealing a ton of damage and paralyzing, though it is able to attack through, and it's able to outspeed SpongeBob, though luckily it misses its Sonic Boom. Hyper Beam from Nuzleaf does quite a bit of damage. I'm able to finish off the Electrode, and then he sends out Vileplume, and I decided to use Thunder Punch into it just in case it decides to take down Patrick, though it actually decides to take down SpongeBob instead, so I do need to swap out to Squidward and go for Psychic to finish off the Vileplume, and then he sends out Whiscash, so maybe it was fortunate that SpongeBob went down when he did, because there's not really much he could have done against Whiscash. Unfortunately, Squidward gets taken down by a single Hyper Beam. I send out Gary, just in case Whiscash went for Hyper Beam or Rock Tomb into that position. Unfortunately, it targets Patrick instead, taking him down in a single hit. I send out Mr. Krabs, and things are getting a little bit dire. I decide to send out Sandy, that way I can make the Body Slams deal a lot more damage. And while they do, unfortunately, it's still not enough to finish off Whiscash, and without a paralysis, it goes for Spark. And actually, it does much less to Mr. Krabs than I thought, though I guess the light screen was up. I go for Quick Attack to finish off the Whiscash, and Body Slam into Nuzleaf, which does get a paralysis, and while it doesn't happen, it does miss a Hyper Beam. Go for Body Slam into Skarmory, which also paralyzes. Sandy nearly gets taken down by a single Hyper Beam, and then gets taken down by a second Hyper Beam. I send out Gary once again to go for Constrict, and you might have noticed that I have not leveled up Gary a single time in ages, though luckily it was able to finish off the Nuzleaf with Constrict. I go for Body Slam, still not doing much to Skarmory whatsoever. It goes for Hyper Beam, and it does a decent amount to Mr. Krabs. I'm pretty sure he'll go down to the next hit he takes, though Skarmory is paralyzed and using Hyper Beam, so it does have to recharge, and it targets Mr. Krabs. All that's left is Gary, but at this point it's basically over. Steelwing gets the KO, and we lose to Plankton on round 1. However, Sandy does have Flamethrower, allowing it to deal damage to the grass and steel types throughout this battle, as well as giving it some amount of utility outside of just spamming Helping Hand. So I go back into the battle, and right away I set up Light Screen just as before, and then I have Sandy go for Flamethrower. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out too well, and Sandy is unfortunately taken down very quickly, and my Thunder Punch gets paralyzed by Electrode Static. Okay, well that's not great. Electrode does luckily go for Sonic Boom into SpongeBob instead of Spark into Patrick, so I am able to take it down, and then out comes Vileplume once again. Though this time, Patrick isn't paralyzed, so I can go for Psychic right away to take it down, and then he sends out the Whiscash once again. I decide not to learn Acid. Hyper Beam from Nuzleaf, not really doing too much to Patrick. Thunder Punch takes Nuzleaf down to half, and the Psychic takes Whiscash down to half. Though it goes for Hyper Beam taking down SpongeBob, I decide to send out Mr. Krabs, and my light screen fades away. I go for Psychic to finish off the Whiscash, bringing out his final Pokemon once again, that's Skarmory. And I go for Body Slam into Nuzleaf to finish it off, so no more Hyper Beams from it. And now I go for Bubble Beam, dealing half, Body Slam, dealing almost nothing. And luckily Patrick is able to survive a Hyper Beam. I send out Squidward once again, that way I can get some experience, and Skarmory goes down. So with that, we defeat Plankton and get back the Krabby Patty secret formula. At level 25, Squidward gets the move Bubble Beam and soon after evolves. And I can't explain it, but he seems a bit more handsome. Anyway, we now go into the battle against Gorgon. He leads with a Lairon and a Celio, and right away I go for Thunder Punch into the Celio, taking it down in a single hit, and then he sends out his Slowking. Body Slam into it, really not doing that much damage, but it does paralyze. Another Thunder Punch nearly takes it down. Body Slam does finish it off, and then out comes Ursaring. Lairon goes for Earthquake, dealing quite a bit to Spongebob, not so much to Mr. Krabs, and a little bit to Ursaring. Thunder Punch, not quite enough to finish off Ursaring, but a Body Slam finishes the job, and then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Primeape. Then Lairon goes for another Earthquake, finishing off Spongebob and taking Mr. Krabs down below half. Primeape does suffer a little bit of damage. I send out Patrick, that way he can deal Psychic damage and take down Primeape, and then all that's left is his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Hypno. Mr. Krabs goes for Body Slam into it, not really doing too much damage. Another Earthquake from Lairon, taking Hypno down to half. I go for Bubble Beam, which didn't really do much. Body Slam does finish it off, and then all that's left is that Lairon, which goes for another Earthquake, finishing off Mr. Krabs with a crit. I decide to send out Gary to get a little bit of experience, and go for Bubble Beam, which finishes off Lairon and beats Gorgon on the first attempt. So with that, the lunch rush is over. However, we have just been notified by Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy that there is evil afoot. So we need to get out there and stop the evil organization, starting with Laverna. She leads with the Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and right away I send out Spongebob and Patrick, go for Thunder Punch into the Gorbis, taking it down in a single hit, and then she sends out Roselia, which luckily is weak to Psychic, so it goes down in a single hit as well. The crit was definitely not necessary. Then out comes Farfetch'd, her first Shadow Pokemon. Gardevoir goes for Thunder Punch, dealing quite a bit to Patrick. I go for Thunder Punch into the Farfetch'd to take it down in a single hit, and then she sends out her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Altaria. I then go for Psychic into it, dealing almost half. Thunder Punch does finish off Patrick, but that's alright. I send out Mr. Krabs, and then I go for Thunder Punch into the Altaria, which also doesn't quite finish it off, unfortunately. Go for Body Slam into Gardevoir, not even dealing half, and Mr. Krabs goes down. Send out Squidward for its excellent special defense. Thunder Punch I know for a fact will finish off the Altaria now, and all that's left is the Gardevoir. I go for Ice Beam into it, really not dealing too much damage, though hopefully that will put it in range for a Thunder Punch to take it down. And Psychic did a surprising amount of damage to Squidward. But anyway, at level 37, Gary gets the move Protect, which I decide to teach over Constrict, and then Gary evolves into its prehistoric counterpart. Before the next fight, I decide to go ahead and teach Thunderbolt to Patrick, and then I go into the battle against Snaddle, who leads with a Quagsire and a Matang. And right away, I go for Helping Hand to power up Psychic to not quite one-shot the Quagsire, surprisingly. And Mudshot lowers Patrick's speed, so it will be slower than some of the threats later on down the line, and Sandy nearly gets taken down in a single hit. I go for Quick Attack to finish off Quagsire, though, and then out comes this next Pokemon, which is a Scizor. Thunderbolt into Matang doesn't even do half, and Thunder Punch actually doesn't do as much damage to Patrick as I would have expected. I decide to send out Squidward and keep Sandy in, have her use Flamethrower against the Scizor. Now luckily Scizor decides to target Squidward with the Silver Wind, not really doing that much damage, but unfortunately it gets the Omni Boost, though the burn will lower its attack quite a lot. Sandy gets taken down, I send out Patrick once again, and I go for Bubble Beam into the Scizor, which doesn't really do much at all now. A second Bubble Beam takes it down to low yellow. Patrick gets taken down by a Silver Wind, I send out Gary. Psychic does quite a bit to Squidward. The burn is just about to finish off the Scizor, though I think I'd prefer it gone at this point. And then out comes his first Shadow Pokemon, which is a Shadow Solrock. I go for Bite, dealing a good amount of damage into it, but unfortunately Gary gets paralyzed by the first Thunder Punch, and Squidward is just a little too weak to take down Solrock with a Bubble Beam. Psychic takes down Squidward, and then I send out Mr. Krabs. So things are pretty bad here, with Gary being paralyzed, and Mr. Krabs not really being able to survive too many special attacking moves. Now luckily the Quick Claw does activate there, and Gary is able to outspeed and take down Solrock, and I do hit a Body Slam into the cast form, dealing a little bit of damage. Though unfortunately the chances of that happening again are very low. And it actually does happen again. Okay, cast form actually survives on a Sliver though, and is able to take down Mr. Krabs, and Gary gets taken down extremely low, though cast form does go down to the Fruity Pebbles, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is actually a Shadow Patrick, which is kind of crazy to believe, but Gary was definitely caught off guard by that. So I go back into the battle once again, No real changes to the strategy, though Patrick is a level higher now, though unfortunately still not quite strong enough to take down Quagsire in a single hit, and Quagsire nearly takes down Sandy in a single hit, though luckily the focus band did work there. I'm able to quick attack and finish off the Quagsire, and then out comes Scizor once again. I go for Thunderbolt into it, dealing about a third. Unfortunately, Sandy doesn't get the luck twice in a row. I send out Squidward once again, and I go for Bubble Beam and Thunderbolt, which Bubble Beam takes it down, and then he sends out his Shadow Soul Rock once again. Though this time I actually have 2 Pokemon on the field with super effective damage, so I should be able to take it down right away. Bubble Beam takes it down to low yellow, and Squidward outspeeds, finishing it off. So out comes Cast Form once again, and I should be able to take that down with another combination of Psychic and Ice Beam, which seems to do the trick, especially with that special defense drop, and then he sends out his Shadow Patrick once again. And I think it's going to use Shadow Storm because it sees the KO on Patrick, so I decide to go for Thunderbolt and Hidden Power, but it actually goes for Shadow Break, taking Squidward down from half health. I send out Spongebob. Thunderbolt takes his Patrick down pretty low. Unfortunately, he takes down my Patrick, and I go for Thunder Punch to finish the job, and then all that's left is the Matang, which Bite doesn't really do that much damage, and unfortunately doesn't get a flinch, though its Psychics really aren't doing all that much in return. And with that, one last bite from Gary finishes off Snaddle. So with that, we now move on to the next trainer, which is Ardos, though it would seem that he is actually being controlled by the Dirty Bubble. Anyway, he leads with a Swallow and an Alakazam, and I decide to lead with Spongebob and Gary, and right away I go for Bite into the Alakazam, dealing quite a bit of damage, though not as much as I was hoping. Thunder Punch is able to take down the Shadow Swallow in a single hit, though not before it's able to set up Shadow Sky. Gary does survive a Thunder Punch from Alakazam, and the little bit of chip damage from Shadow Sky. I go for Thunder Punch into the Kingdra, getting a crit, but not quite enough to finish it off, though it did get paralyzed, and it does get paralyzed. Alakazam and Kingdra are both now down to a sliver, so they both go down at the same time, though Gary follows with them. I then send out Patrick, and he sends out Heracross, and a Shadow Spongebob? There's no way. Anyway, I go for Psychic into Heracross to take it down, and Light Screen to stop the Shadow Spongebob's Shadow Storm, but it uses its Dark Karate Shadow Break in order to take down Patrick in a single hit, so I send out Sandy, and I go for Thunder Punch and Helping Hand, which should take down the Heracross, I hope, but it doesn't. And Sandy goes down in a single hit. I send out Mr. Krabs, and Heracross goes for Brick Break, breaking the Light Screen and also dealing quite a bit of damage to Mr. Krabs in the process. Go for Thunder Punch, which will finish off the Heracross, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Snorlax. However, because the Light Screen was just broken, his Shadow Spongebob goes for Shadow Storm, which takes down both my Spongebob and Mr. Krabs, leaving just Squidward left, who unfortunately can't really do much here unless he gets extremely lucky. Ice Beam actually gets a freeze, and Snorlax misses. Okay, maybe there's a chance. No, his Shadow Spongebob breaks free immediately and KOs. So I decide to go ahead and go over to the Tutor Lady and pick up the move Thunder Wave, which I decide to teach over Swift. However, after a couple more losses, I decide to do a little bit of training at Mount Battle. At level 38, Squidward gets the move Barrier, and finally at level 47, Spongebob gets the move Thunderbolt, which leads us to attempt number 6 against Ardos and the Dirty Bubble. So right away I go for Thunderbolt, taking down Swallow while it sets up Shadow Sky, and then out comes Kingdra. Alakazam goes for Psychic, nearly dealing half to Spongebob, but unfortunately it also lowers his special defense, so that might actually be a bit of an issue. Now I did consider swapping Spongebob out, though I think it might just be better to go on the offensive, so I take down the Alakazam, bringing out his Heracross once again. Hydro Pump does deal quite a lot to Gary, though luckily it didn't take down Electabuzz that turn. The Fruity Pebbles rain down, and I go for a Thunderbolt into the Kingdra, which does not take it down, and Heracross finishes off Gary with a Brick Break. I send out Patrick, and Kingdra goes for Dragon Breath. Luckily no paralysis, and the Fruity Pebbles finish off Kingdra, and so he sends out his Shadow Spongebob once again, where I can finally enact my plan that I've had since the second attempt, and that's to use Thunderbolt against him. That way he's slower than the rest of my Pokemon, and hopefully doesn't attack nearly as often. Out comes the Shadow Snorlax once again. Unfortunately, the Shadow Spongebob is able to use its Karate Shadow Break once again and take down Patrick, and I send out Sandy. And then I go for Thunderbolt and Helping Hand, which should hopefully deal quite a bit to the Shadow Spongebob. It does over half, so as long as it's not a range, I should be able to take it down on the following turn. Unfortunately, it does use Shadow Mist, so now Snorlax is going to hit its next Shadow End. The Shadow Spongebob goes down, and all that's left is this Shadow Snorlax, which takes down Spongebob, but it does cut its own health in half in the process. So I send out Mr. Krabs, my best physical attacker, and with the support of Sandy, it does actually kind of very little. Sandy goes down, and then I send out Squidward, and with their powers combined, I go for Ice Beam and Body Slam, which doesn't quite finish off the Snorlax, though it does paralyze. It misses its Shadow End, and now it's time to finish off the Snorlax with one last Body Slam. So with that, we defeat Ardos and the Dirty Bubble. Now moving on to Gorgon, he leads with a Slowking and Ursaring, and I decide to send out Spongebob and Patrick. Thunderbolt is able to take down Slowking in a single hit, and then out comes Aggron, and for some reason I attacked Ursaring, which doesn't make sense, it always protects on that turn. But anyway, I go for Thunderbolt into Ursaring on the following turn, and take down Aggron with a Bubble Beam, and then he sends out Walrein. Ursaring goes for Slash, not really doing too much, though a crit would be quite powerful at this point. Go for Thunderbolt into the Walrein, taking it down in a single hit, and then out comes Poliwrath, his first Shadow Pokemon, and I had to have been falling asleep at this point because I attack Ursaring once again while it goes for Protect. I do finish it off with a Thunderbolt, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Mr. Mime, and I go for Psychic to take down the Poliwrath. Though unfortunately it's not quite a one-shot, and so it's able to set up Shadow Sky, boosting the power of the Shadow moves. And so to prevent Mr. Mime from dealing a ton of damage, I double into it, but unfortunately it survives on just a sliver, and Poliwrath is able to take down Spongebob. I then send out Squidward, who will probably do the best at tanking that damage, and I go for Ice Beam into the Mr. Mime and Thunderbolt to finish off Poliwrath. And Mr. Mime's Shadow Storm is easily shrugged off by Squidward, though Patrick does fall. I send out Mr. Krabs, and Ice Beam takes down the Shadow Mr. Mime. So with that, we beat Gorgon, and now we move on to the battle against Man Ray. Anyway, I go into the battle. He leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I want to get rid of the Ninjask because I don't want my Patrick being taken down by Silverwind. However, I hadn't accounted for the fact that Manectric might have Lightning Rod as its ability, and I didn't think Ninjask was going to go for Dig right away. So unfortunately, Squidward gets taken down very low by a Shadow End. Though Ninjask's Dig does very little to Mr. Krabs, I finish off the Manectric, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, which is a Shadow Salamence. And I was really hoping to have Squidward out here to deal with it, but unfortunately I had to swap it out. I decided to send out Gary in Patrick's position to survive Shadow Rushes better, and luckily I made the right call. Though unfortunately I didn't make the right call here because Ninjask actually goes for Dig once again, because it's super effective against Gary. And so I just wasted another turn trying to attack Ninjask, but anyway, I get a lucky Quick Claw that allows me to outspeed the Salamence and get a flinch on it, which is very nice. Mr. Krabs does go down to a Silverwind. I send out Spongebob, and Salamence goes for Shadow Rush, dealing quite a bit to Spongebob, though it does get paralyzed in the process, so now it is slower than all my Pokemon. I go for Protect with Gary, which I actually don't know what I was going for there because Ninjask is going to Dig this turn. But anyway, I finish off Salamence with a Quick Attack, and then he sends out Flygon, which Bite does very little to. Dig unfortunately attacks Spongebob, taking him down. I send out Squidward once again, and go for Ice Beam into Flygon, but as it turns out Flygon is actually faster and is able to take down Squidward. I send out Patrick once again, and Gary goes for Bite, still not really doing that much damage. I go for a Psychic, which does take down the Flygon, and with a crit, though I'm not sure if it was necessary. He then sends out Shadow Marowak, and I should hopefully be able to take that down with a Bubble Beam and a Water Gun, which Bubble Beam gets a crit taking it down, and just to be safe, I went for Water Gun into it as well. However, unfortunately, Lapras does have Water Absorb, so it does nothing to it. Gary goes down to a Dig. I send out Sandy. Now, I think with a Thunderbolt and a Helping Hand, I should be able to take down the Lapras, so I do just that, Helping Hand, and Ninjask hits a Silverwind into Sandy, which unfortunately gives it an Omanyte boost. Thunderbolt does take down the Lapras, but now Ninjask absolutely takes down my Starmie with Silverwind. That is extremely unfortunate. So I go back into the battle once again, but this time I go for Thunder Wave into the Manectric, that way it might not hit, or use Shadow Sky, and I have Squidward raise its defense by 2 stages with Barrier. That way it'll survive the Dig or the Shadow Rush from Salamence. I go for Thunderbolt into the Manectric and Ice Beam, which does finish it off, and then he sends out that Salamence, which should hopefully go down to a single Ice Beam. Though, just to be safe, I am probably going to go for Ice Beam and Thunderbolt into it, which Thunderbolt deals about a third. Shadow Rush takes down Spongebob. Okay, well that's not great. I send out Gary in response, and Ice Beam isn't quite enough to finish off the Salamence. Okay, well this is quite possibly the worst thing that could happen, unless Gary outspeeds with the Quick Claw. It does not. But Salamence actually just goes for Shadow Hold, which is a bit strange. I'm able to take it down with another Ice Beam, and then out comes Flygon, which takes a bite. After a round of Fruity Pebbles, I should be able to take down the Flygon with a single Ice Beam, and hopefully with the double-edged damage it receives, it'll put it in a better range. Luckily it does go down, and then out comes the Shadow Marowak once again, and the Water Gun should hit it, dealing quite a bit of damage. It actually does half. Ninjask is underground, and I don't know who it's going to attack. It decides to hit Gary instead, go for Ice Beam, which finishes off Marowak, and then out comes the Lapras once again. And just to be safe, I went for Water Gun again. I go for Hidden Power Bug and Bite, which does almost nothing, and Bite does almost nothing as well, and Lapras goes straight for Shadow Storm, which takes down Gary and nearly takes down Squidward. Unfortunately, because it sees a KO on Squidward, it is going to go for another Shadow Storm, dealing quite a bit to Patrick in the process, but unfortunately there's really not much I can do about that, so he goes for Shadow Storm, getting a crit on Squidward, and taking Patrick down to half. And after a little bit of thought, I decided to send out Sandy. Now, it's very clear that I was extremely tired at this point, because I decided to go for Helping Hand and Thunderbolt to take down the Lapras, when I know for a fact that Thunderbolt would have taken down the Lapras from this health without it, and I could have had any other Pokemon attack the Ninjask at this point. But anyway, because the Ninjask could attack either of my Pokemon to take them down, I decided to just go ahead and attack with both of them, which it does unfortunately take down Patrick, and so I only deal a little bit of damage with Quick Attack, though on the following turn I go for Helping Hand, Sandy goes down, and Body Slam is not able to finish off the Ninjask. Anyway, one last Body Slam does the trick, and we beat Man Ray. Now moving on to the Big Box Legendary Shadow Lugia. And right away, I have Spongebob go for Thunderbolt and Sandy use Helping Hand, and Spongebob gets taken down well below half. However, he retaliates, taking Shadow Lugia down to about the same percent. Unfortunately, Spongebob is slower and gets taken down by a second Shadow Blast. I send out Patrick and another Helping Hand, and Thunderbolt should be able to take down the Shadow Lugia. I send out Squidward after Sandy goes down, and Psychic. Oh no, what am I doing? Anyway, Squidward takes quite a bit of damage, but Thunderbolt finishes off Shadow Lugia, and now we move on to the final boss, which is Old Man Jenkins. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? Anyway, he sends out a Shadow Moltres and Rhydon, and right away I go for Thunderbolt into the Moltres, dealing quite a bit of damage to it. Though maybe Bubble Beam would have been better, but it also doesn't have the chance to paralyze, so that was definitely nice. Unfortunately, Moltres is able to act and takes down Mr. Krabs in a single hit. I finish off the Moltres, and then out comes his next Pokemon, a Shadow Executor. Bubble Beam into Rhydon takes it down in a single hit, and then he sends out Tauros. Luckily, neither of my Pokemon are physical attackers, so it's not all that much of an issue. Go for Psychic into it, taking it down below half, but Shadow Rush is able to take down Squidward. I send out Gary, and Executor hits a Shadow End, nearly taking down Patrick in a single hit. Go for a Psychic to take down the Tauros, and then he sends out his next legendary bird, Shadow Articuno. And I go for Bite into Executor, which doesn't quite finish it off, but does flinch it. Go for another Bite to finish off the Executor with the Quick Claw, and then out comes the final Pokemon, the Shadow Zapdos. Psychic into Zapdos doesn't really deal all that much damage, and Patrick goes down. Go for Bite, dealing almost nothing, and Gary goes down. However, that wasn't too bad for a first attempt, missing 2 of my Pokemon, so I go back into the battle once again, and this time I set up Light Screen and go for Bubble Beam right away to take down the Rhydon, and then he sends out the Executor once again. With the Light Screen up, Moltres isn't dealing nearly as much damage as before. I go for Thunderbolt to nearly take it down, and a second one to finish it off, and then he sends out Tauros. Luckily, the Executor misses its Shadow End, and I go for another Thunderbolt combo into Tauros to take it down, and then he sends out Articuno once again, and hopefully with these two attacking together, I should be able to take it down in a single turn. Unfortunately, Executor hits a Shadow End, taking down Spongebob. So I decided to send out Squidward because it's probably best equipped to deal with Articuno's strong special attacks, so I go for Ice Beam, which is dealing almost nothing to it, and it sets up Shadow Sky, which unfortunately means that that Shadow End just got boosted and took down my Squidward right away. So I send out Gary, and luckily the Quick Claw activates, allowing me to outspeed and take down Exeggutor right away, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is Zapdos once again. Patrick's Thunderbolt doesn't quite finish off the Articuno, but it does leave it paralyzed, so I will be able to outspeed and take it down the following turn. So I decide to go ahead and have Gary bite Zapdos and get a lucky Quick Claw. Though it doesn't get paralyzed, I send out Sandy and Thunderbolt to finish off the Articuno. And now all I need is a little bit of luck. So as long as it targets Sandy, I think I'm good. I go for Helping Hand and Psychic, and Shadow Bolt hits Patrick, taking it down in a single hit. And unfortunately, with that is another loss, because there's no way Mr. Krabs is going to survive any attacks here. Shadow Bolt takes it down, and all that's left is Sandy, who goes for one last quick attack before getting taken down herself. So it is definitely a very doable fight. However, I just need a little bit more luck on my side. I go for Bubble Beam once again, taking down the Rhydon and setting up Light Screen just as before. Then out comes the Exeggutor, Shadow Fire into Patrick, dealing a little under half. And then Thunderbolt into the Moltres, not quite enough to take it down in a single hit, so a second Thunderbolt will have to do the job. Then out comes Tauros, and just like before, I can use Thunderbolt twice to take down the Tauros. Now all I need is just a little bit of Exeggutor luck. I just need it to either miss or not hit Spongebob. Anyway, out comes the Articuno, and Exeggutor hitting Spongebob, but luckily not taking it down this time. Go for Thunderbolt into Articuno, and a second Thunderbolt to finish it off. And luckily the Exeggutor is actually paralyzed this time too, so there's a chance that it might not be able to move. Well, it took down Spongebob, but I still have most of my team. I send out Sandy. Maybe if Zapdos decides not to attack Patrick. Oh, I actually outspeed now. Okay, well Sandy goes down in a single hit, but not before it helps to deal a ton of damage. Exeggutor is able to hit through the inaccuracy and paralysis to take down Patrick. I send out Squidward, and suddenly things are getting a little closer than I would have liked. Squidward does survive with a decent amount of health left, and Body Slam and Ice Beam is able to take down the Zapdos. And another Shadow End nearly takes down Mr. Krabs. But with that, Squidward finishes off Exeggutor, and we beat Old Man Jenkins. So with that, how well did the SpongeBob crew do? Well, they beat the game at a time of 11 hours, 48 minutes, and 52 seconds, with SpongeBob at level 51, Patrick at level 48, Squidward at level 41, Mr. Krabs at level 35, Gary at level 44, and Sandy at level 26. With 14 losses throughout the game, 12 of those to bosses, and 2 of those to random trainers. So I'd say overall, they did fairly well throughout the game, with only a few hiccups here and there. So let's go and go over the positives and negatives of this team. I think the first positive is the amount of type variety that these Pokemon learn. Sure, a lot of them have a lot of overlap, but the thing is that also means that I can pick and choose which Pokemon gets which move. On top of that, there's a lot of very fast Pokemon here and a lot of slower Pokemon, which allows me to have a bit of variation on how fast the battle goes. And I think the last thing is that I'd say most of these Pokemon on the team are all good individually. But that kind of leads into the negative, where together they're maybe not the best team because a good majority of them are part water, and so they share a lot of weaknesses, which can lead to some pretty bad situations. And since this is a team video, of course, it is going to take quite a bit more experience to get the whole team up to levels that are reasonable against some of the bosses, and so sometimes some Pokemon fall so far behind that they take a lot of experience to even catch up, and other times I'm putting way too much experience into Pokemon that don't really contribute to much. With all that being said though, even if they didn't do the greatest, only ending up in the B+ tier, this was definitely one of the most fun runs I've ever done, and especially doing the artwork and the voice recording for this has just been a blast. So if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!